All right, cool. All right, well, I'm ready to go if everybody else is. Again, thank you for your patience. The first part of the presentation I'm going to be leading, and then Eric's going to take over, and we'll go ahead and get started. So this is Media Outreach 101, and I am Meryl Clark. So I have a background in both newspapers and public relations. I graduated from Muskegon University in 2008, and I do a lot of media outreach in my current role. I work in the fenestration and glazing industry, which is a fancy way of saying windows and doors. But a lot of the things that I do in my current role at my company can translate to any kind of industry, and that includes activism. So I've really enjoyed being able to apply some of my skills to the work that Indivisible MOV has been doing since it began. Eric, would you like to introduce yourself as well?
Sure, yeah. I'm Eric Engel, and I am a Chief Union Steward for National Treasury Employees Union Chapter 190.
No longer exists.
Essentially, yeah, we still exist. Some don't, but we don't have an enforceable contract. And I've been a board president of Mid-Ohio Valley Climate Action for 10 years, which is a local nonprofit climate and environmental organization. And I'm just happy to be here tonight. I really, the only reason I'm here tonight presenting with Meryl is I submit and have submitted for many years a lot of op-eds and letters to the editor, to the Parkersburg News and Sentinel and to the Charleston Gazette Mail. And I'm also a Substack writer since September of 2023, and I've published 82 of those in that time. So I write a lot and get it submitted and published a lot. And I just wanted to go over some things tonight about, the how to do that and motivators and influencing and that sort of thing. So thank you. Appreciate it.
Excellent. All right. Here is a little bit of our agenda today. So we're going to start out with some Journalism 101, and then we'll go into the elements of what makes a press release, the information that you need to include. Then we'll get into the do's and don'ts of working with reporters and editors. So there can be a little bit of a delicate dance to that. And then we'll conclude with Eric's presentation or information about how to write and submit a killer letter to the editor, or an op-ed, which is what we call an opinion piece. So I don't know if you are aware, but journalism is basically the only profession that is specifically called out and protected in the U.S. Constitution. Over time, freedom of the press has been tried and tested through various court cases, as well as libel laws in different jurisdictions. And there is a high burden of proof before publication, as there, of course, should be. Thank you, Eric.
I didn't think about the door that time.
So the first thing I'm going to get into with Journalism 101 is what a lead is. So a lead is the intro paragraph of any news article, or in our case, any press release. So it does its best to answer these 6 basic questions as succinctly as possible. So if you took like an English or Comp 101 class at any point, think of the lead as your essay's topic sentence. It's the same kind of thing. So you want to cover the who, what, when, where, and why, and also how. I wish that how could start with the W's. We could have the 6 W's of journalism. But so this is the framework used by many journalists to help them communicate the key details of a story effectively. By following this checklist, you can make sure that the most relevant information is included in that first sentence of an article. Next up, we have the idea of the inverted pyramid, which is how journalists tend to structure a story. And if you've got the 5 W's and the 1 H in your lead, you can move on to the rest. So the body of your story is the bulk of the article. You'll probably want something in here that's at least 1 quote. In the parameters that we're talking about, it's a press release about an upcoming protest that is being hosted by Indivisible MOV. So you would probably quote one of the steering committee leaders or whoever is the best point of contact for that upcoming event. And quotes are where you can really add some color to a press release. because for the most part, your press release is information only. You want logistics, you want to answer the main questions and things like that. But to really motivate and get people engaged and interested in why they should attend, that's where you can use a quote to your real advantage. So while you can't have an opinion in the body of what you're writing for your press release, you can have an opinion within the parameters of a quote. So if it's attributed to somebody, then an opinion can make its way into a press release or an article. And then I've got a little bit of information here, just again, because this is Journalism 101. So specifically for news articles, it is critical to capture opposing and varied points of views in your article, no matter what the topic is. That said, that is where public relations differs. With PR, you have a set agenda, and you are trying to further that agenda. So that is where the two very much differ. So journalism, unbiased, lots of viewpoints, different sources, variety of sources. Public relations, typically one source, one point of view. So that, yeah, just keep that in mind. PR is one-sided, but you also need to remember that editors and reporters are obligated to seek comments from those who may oppose you or oppose your agenda. All that said, so far with our coverage, that has not really been the case. Like, we've gotten a lot of really good press. I'm going to show you some examples later. But if that comes up down the road, which we don't really know what the future is going to hold, try to be understanding if maybe our press release gets picked up, but some stuff gets added to it that we would not have chosen. But that is the right, if not duty, of the news publication that we send these to. And then also that touches on what Eric is going to talk about, which is how an opinion piece is very different from a news article. So we can talk about that too. All right, so once you have the body of your press release, you can add the tail, which is just what it sounds like. That is the end, where you wrap it up with any other necessary background information that the reader or the editor may need to add context. So I always end Indivisible MOV's press releases with a sentence about our next event, our next monthly meeting, and how readers can find us online. So it's just boilerplate language at the end of every press release that stays the same, more or less. We'll take a closer look at that when we break down the elements of a press release, which is right now. So I have a saved template for Indivisible MOV press releases, and the highlighted sections that you see here always change and need updated. The rest of it is on an as-needed basis, such as information about our next day of action, whenever that's available. And you'll see here at the bottom that there are 3 pound signs or hashtags at the bottom, and that is just an industry trade thing where that signifies the end of the news release. So if you have information at the bottom that might be about any artwork or photos that you provided, that goes down under that, just to make sure that it's very clear where the news release ends. So let's talk about what makes a successful press release. So we're getting to some best
We're
practices.
getting these slides, are we?
I'm sorry.
We will get these slides?
Yes.
Because I can't keep.
No, yeah, I wish this screen was a little bit bigger. Okay, so the first thing that makes a press release successful is timing. This is a really big one. So as you know, in our line of work, sometimes protests get scheduled even on the national level within a matter of days. And that is super impressive that can get rolled out so quickly, but it does present a challenge for informing local media. When possible, for example, with the Labor Day protests that we're having, those were planned well in advance, and so you kind of have a little bit more of a buffer. So it's really great to give at least 1 week's notice, if not 2. Editors just really like to know what they have lined up in terms of their content as well in advance as possible. And the second thing that makes a quality press release, a successful press release, is quality. So you want to make sure you include all necessary information. You don't want a reporter or editor to have to come back to you for something that you forgot, because that significantly decreases your chances of it getting picked up. If they've got everything they need and they don't need to reach out to you and follow up, it is a lot more likely that it is going to run as quickly as possible. one thing that I learned in doing this training, I reached out to the News and Sentinel to get some advice, which I'm going to share in a minute here. But one thing that they said was that they are a lot more likely to run something that we send them, like a press release, if it includes a photo, because they need to have art. Newspapers and magazines have what they call like stock images or photos on file. So they probably at this point have several file photos of our organization just from previous events and coverage that we've sent them, but they've already used them. So they always want like a new one that hasn't been printed yet or ran online yet. So, and that, they weren't kidding. Like, we've had some pretty good success ever since we started sending photos along with the press releases. Okay, next up, brevity is important. So keep it short. Let your quotes give your press release color and leave the rest just for the facts. The fourth thing is relevancy. So because we are part of a national organization, we are a local chapter. I'm not sure if that's the correct terminology for that. Yeah,
I'd say local chapter.
Okay. Yeah. It's really great to try to tie national news stories back to West Virginia, back to Ohio, ideally back to Washington County, back to Wood County. That's not always possible, but when we talked about, I believe it was the Care Not Cuts protest that was outside Camden Clark, for that press release, we included some stuff about how those Medicaid cuts were going to hit those respective states. And it's just that you're giving these editors more of a reason to run your stuff, because that's where the News and Sentinel is covering. They're covering West Virginia. The Marietta Times is covering Ohio. Again, as local as you can make it, the better, but we don't always have the stats available for Wood County and Washington County specifically when it comes to these issues. Okay, so I guess the bottom line is think locally. Again, so I reached out to the News and Sentinel to try to get some information and advice for this training. And this was what Christina Meyer, the editor-in-chief of the News and Sentinel, said. So I have found this really helpful because the day of, I think I'm going to get into this example later. This is a little bit of a spoiler. But the day of the Fight the Trump Takeover protest that was held on August 16th in Mineral Wells, it was a weekend, and I wasn't really sure if Christina Meyer would see it. So I contacted Evan Bevins directly on her recommendation with this advice. And what I sent to him ran on Monday morning. It was great. Yeah, so I'll show you that in a minute here. But yeah, especially if you just send something kind of generic to the News and Sentinel email, follow up with like an actual person if you have a contact at that organization. I've been running into that a little bit with WTAP. But yeah, so another piece of advice that Christina Meyer had is, again, about user-submitted content, which was very surprising to me because I did not think that they would take something that their reporter had not independently worked on. But that was not the case. So I am, by all means, going to take advantage of that now and in the future. So yeah, they will take user-submitted content. You just have to, again, if you're going to submit a more article-style piece for them, I would be happy to help you, but that is a little more complicated because you have to have details like someone's full name, where they live, and if you possibly can get it, their age, but that's not, of the three, that's the least important. But there's more parameters that make it a little more complicated. But again, if you're interested in that, talk to me after. I'll work with you on that. So yeah, so with this example here, you can see kind of the result of being sure to send a photo and all the relevant information. This is a news clipping from after the Memorial Day protest. So they did not, I don't think that they did any coverage of that in advance of that event, but they did let us cover it after the fact. And that was something I think I worked on with Kim, where Kim had a write-up, so I kind of consolidated that, but then sent in a photo. And then, Brian, do you know if this is one of yours, this photo? Do you remember?
I do not believe so.
Okay. I think it just says photo provided by Indivisible MOB, but like that was enough for them to run with it, so
It was a
that
drone.
was really great.
It was a drone photo, actually. From
A drone photo?
Got it. Okay, and then yeah, along those lines, they will give photo credit if we request it. So I think it was like an event a few weeks after that one that Brian got some photos of the Care Not Cuts protest, and I think this was promoting an event that wasn't really related to that specific topic, but they still used that photo because it was like we provided it to them. We had the information of who took it and what event it was from, so they were able to run that. And then, yeah, here's just some other clippings. Like, we've had a lot of success in a short amount of time. Yeah, we had early success, I noticed, with WTAP coverage, but we're in a little bit of a disadvantage in that area because the reporter that I typically send stuff to does not work weekends, and that is when a lot of our events happen. So, but he's been very, like, he's been supportive in the sense of, like, you know, keep sending me stuff, but there's not really a guarantee that it's going to get covered. I have been carrying out a plan to try to entice WTAP to pick up coverage of some of our protests after the fact, but so far I have not been successful. I'll get into that in a minute here. So this is what I'm talking about. I did a bunch of interviews at the Fight the Trump Takeover event in Mineral Wells. I interviewed some of our leaders, you can see Kim here, and some of the protesters there who had showed up, and they were very kind with me in sharing their thoughts and their names and their locations. So I had all of the information that WTAP would have needed if they had taken me up on this footage. That said, they did not. I am going to keep trying. I plan to cover the Labor Day protests in the same way that I did with this one. Send the package to them, hope it makes the weekend news, but my expectations are low. That said, I'm still happy with it because, like I said, the News and Sentinel covered that protest with, like, I used the same quotes from this video footage that I got, wrote an article using them, and that ran. So, like, that got eyes on it, even if the video itself didn't on WTAP. And then I just went ahead, I edited it myself, I put it on our social media platforms, and just kind of let it take its course.
She did a very good job on the clip she edited. It looks professional.
Oh, that's very kind of you. I need to get a gimbal like what you've got, so.
Trish gave it to me.
Hey, all right. Good to know. Well, thank you. So yeah, I guess that's just, you know, take away from this case study that even if something doesn't get picked up as you might hope, you can give it new life in a different venue. Okay, so sometimes if you do a really great job promoting an event in advance, you might get surprised with some unsolicited media attention. This is a good problem to have. We recently had the good luck of getting some media attention from Mountain State Spotlight, a statewide outlet. They drove up from Charleston to talk to our group outside of the Riley Moore protest here at the library. And they interviewed Trish, and she did a great job. And it was like a really good article that got into the fact that our reps and senators here in West Virginia are truly failing us by not holding town halls. They had a great follow-up this week. I don't know if you saw it. But anyway, that's a side tangent. I'll get into that later. But yeah, so I think that reporter came up to that event because we promoted those protests. And that was a quick turnaround too. Like, we didn't find out about those mobile office hours until I think a week before they took place. But we got on top of it and promoted them, and then I think that was the result of that, was that article. Okay, so we've heard from an editor here locally. Now I want to get into some advice from the public relations side of things and how to work successfully with editors and reporters. So the advice that I'm going to give you is courtesy of a woman named Heather West. She works in the window and door industry, so I know her from my day job, but she is sympathetic to our cause, and she had some really great advice that, again, carries over across industries. And I just want to touch on, this was her first, and I think maybe most important piece of advice, and that is to not be misleading with the media, because that can really tarnish your credibility. They're not going to want to work with you if they feel like they can't trust you. And I kind of thought of a local example of that. Like, you guys remember Parkersburg Fest from a couple of weeks ago? Okay, yeah, I feel like that is an example of an event, like it was clearly an evangelical event that was being marketed and promoted in such a way that completely obscured that fact. And so they lost credibility with a lot of people locally just right off the bat because people could see through that. So just keep Parkersburg Fest in mind when working with the media. All right, first off, we have some do's of media outreach, and I'm just going to go through these because I know it's a little small on the screen. So do be polite and respectful of their time. Keep your pitches brief. Do state why a story is relevant to their readers. Include useful data and statistics when possible. Do include artwork. You're going to want high-resolution photos for print media, video for television. And then next we have do stick with email. This kind of depends. Like, it does seem to be that journalists prefer email overall, but they may specify like, oh, just text me, and like that's fine. That can be an avenue that's acceptable to continue contacting them. Do your research and only send materials that are relevant to the outlet's audience or to a specific journalist beat. And then the last one, spokespeople should be well prepared for live interviews. Try to keep it to 3 key points, and do not assume that you can keep something off the record, because that's kind of a quagmire. So if you get a question and you are not sure if you want to answer it, you want to give some background information without giving a full answer, I would advise you to instead simply say no comments. As far as our don'ts, do not share a reporter's contact information without their permission. It might be tempting if you're talking to somebody else in the group and they say like, oh, like I want to cover this thing, or I want to write something about XYZ. You might say like, oh, I know somebody at such and such, like here, let me give you their information. Like that is fine as long as you ask that reporter first. So that is step 1. And then next, do not spam journalists with irrelevant news or pitches. They will block you. Just think about how annoying those spam texts are, and try to keep away from sounding like a spam text. And third, this is something interesting that I hadn't put a whole lot of thought into, but Heather West mentioned advising not using AI. Apparently, yeah, like I guess the majority of journalists, or at least the ones that she is working with, are opposed to, or at least remain suspicious of AI-generated content. So something to think about. And then we touched on this a little bit, but one other big thing to consider about media outreach that is specific to our group. If you live in West Virginia, it might be easy to forget that this group serves Ohio too. And if you live in Ohio, you might forget that we're also covering West Virginia. So it is, I feel like it is critical that we cover both, and preferably in equal measure. And I know that can be tough because if you live in one, you're keyed into one. I get it. But yeah, just try to keep that in mind in terms of coverage. Ideally, you want coverage of an event before and after, but it's unlikely you're going to get both. If you don't see coverage in advance, getting the word out about something, try submitting a write-up of it after the fact. So all is not lost. You can still get coverage after the fact. And like I said, I did that after the Fight the Trump Takeover protest, and News and Sentinel ran what I sent them with minimal edits. And there were like 6 people quoted in that. We looked really good. It was a good piece. Okay, before I hand it off to Eric, does anybody have any questions? All right, anything in the chat?
No.
Okay, all right, Eric, you ready to take it away?
Sure. Thank you. That was a tough act to follow. Really good. So again, my name's Eric Engel. What I want to talk to folks about, I'm coming up here to use this board. So I'm doing it old school. She was more technologically advanced than I am this evening. And so what I want to go through is actually just writing letters to the editor and op-ed columns. And those are 2 different things, okay? So letters to the editor are shorter. And the first things I want to mention are actually the word limits, because every editor will have word limits when it comes to letters to the editor, and then also for op-ed columns. So the letters to the editor, we'll put LTTE 300 to 400 words is typically what you're going to run into with editors. So you really don't want to surpass 300 to 400 words, generally speaking, with letters to the editor. With op-ed columns, you can usually get away with about 500 to 700 words And you generally do not want to exceed that. Now, working with Christina Meyer and Ben Fields, who's the editor at the Charleston Gazette-Mail, very, very good, they will, at times, if they have the space and if they feel like they can accommodate it, they have accommodated as many as 800 and even 900 words with writers that we have submitted. But generally speaking, they will tell you, vast majority of the time, please don't exceed these word limits if you want it to get published. And they do have different approaches. So Christina will publish, when it comes to op-eds and letters to the editor, exactly what you submit. That's spelling and grammatical errors, anything that you may have published that was later found not to be true. Someone Googles what you published and says, hey, they published something false. It gets published because it's not the editor's responsibility to fact check you in an opinion piece. This isn't a news piece. This isn't a PR submission. This is your opinion that you're sharing with the public. So you want to fact check yourself, and you want to run that spell checker, and you want to make sure that, and it's good. It really is a good practice to get a letter to the editor or an op-ed in front of at least 2 to 3 other sets of eyes. The more people can help you edit your content before you submit it, the better. No matter how many times you read and reread your own work, you may skip over a grammatical error or a spelling error that you made or something that you omitted, whatever, over and over again. So it's really good to have someone else, especially someone maybe with some editing experience, someone who's a writer, if you know someone like that, that you can share your piece with before you submit it. And maybe there's a better way of doing it. Now, and that brings me to the point of Ben Fields. And his approach is he doesn't publish exactly what you submit. Ben will go through, and if he can correct spelling and grammatical errors for you, he will, if he can pick those up. And he's a very experienced editor who's very good at that. If there's a shorter, simpler, more concise way to say something, like he felt like maybe you had a run-on sentence or a rambling thought in your piece, he'll make it a little bit more concise. He doesn't change the base of what you're saying. He doesn't alter your piece to the point where it doesn't look like your piece. But he tries to convey what you're saying in a more simple, concise way. And a lot of good editors will do that. I see Christina's point in just publishing what you send. Not only is that easier on her, but it's authentic, right? But with Ben, his take on it is, if I can help you kind of clean up the language and make your thinking a little bit more concise and accurate, I'm going to help you do that. So it's different based on the editor. So what I'd really like to do is kind of talk about my process for submitting letters to the editor and op-eds. The vast majority of what I submit are op-eds because I'm really wordy, right? If I want to say something and write it to a paper, it's probably going to take me 700 or 800 words or more to say it. So I'm not going to limit myself to 300 to 400 words typically, unless I, have some reason for that. But in my process, what I do is the biggest thing for me that I think is so important if you're going to start writing op-eds and letters to the editor is to identify not only your interests and your passions. What matters? Mario theme, I love it. Truly what matters to most to you as a person. So this is what I was talking about with loose leaf paper earlier. If you all have some that you want to write on just to go along with me, if not, that's okay. I am going to write 4 examples of things that motivate my writing. And we're a political group here, right? So it probably is going to be political in nature with this group. But it doesn't always have to be. Maybe it's just an interest, a hobby. You hike, you bike, you swim. You're a poetry writer, whatever it is that motivates you to write. But for this purposes of this group, if you that's fine. So the 4 that usually motivate me to write have to do with my identity as a union rep. Just put union. As I mentioned earlier, a climate nonprofit leader, so I'll just put MOVCA. I'm often motivated to write as someone who does non-theistic or atheistic secular advocacy, so I'll just put, for simplicity, atheist. And then as like a fourth level of kind of what motivates me, a lot of my interests or passions have to do with like policy. So government policy, union policy, actually my job, and it sounds really heck of a lot fancier than it is financial systems analyst. But part of what I do at the Bureau has been reviewing policy like federal travel guidance. I work in federal travel. And so they have federal travel regulations. So a lot of times I'll review and apply regulatory frameworks to the work I do. So I've always kind of enjoyed law and policy, rules and regs, and that motivates a lot of my writing. So what I want you to do is just for some engagement here, think about 3 or 4 things, doesn't have to be 4, 3 or 4 things that about yourself that would motivate you to write an op-ed. Not necessarily write a book or a poem or something like that, or a news piece or a PR release, but actual op-ed or a letter to the editor. What would motivate you? We'll just take a minute to do that. I'll give you a second to think about it there.
There was a recommendation in the chat. Someone said, I also recommend reading your pieces out loud as I have found errors while speaking before sending.
Oh, that's very good advice. Yeah, reading them out loud. Because you do read much more carefully if you're giving it in an out loud spoken format. That's really good advice. I still see some people writing, so we'll take just another few seconds here and let folks do what they're going to do here. Okay, looks like everyone's done writing there. So does anyone want to shout out one thing that they put about themselves? I don't want to put anyone on the spot.
Being a mom.
Being a mom. Being a mom. I'll just put mom up here.
Female.
Female.
Yep.
Local history.
Local history.
World history.
Excellent. World history. I'll put world here in parentheses.
I put hearing aids, but I think it could also be extended to healthcare.
Healthcare, as an example, hearing aids, which is so important because apparently health insurers, public and private, think that ears, eyes, and teeth aren't health. I don't know what that is. Okay.
Public schools.
Public schools.
Climate alarmist.
Climate alarmist, she says. Alarmist is the right attitude.
Rights of the disenfranchised.
Disenfranchised rights. Disenfranchised to shorten it.
I'll put a naturalized citizen.
Naturalized citizen or immigration policy.
Naturalized citizen, and I mean,
That's you. That's
yes, me.
You are a migrant from Canada, right?
I am a naturalized citizen from Canada.
From Canada. You are a naturalized citizen.
I'm not a migrant.
Not a migrant. Okay, so anyone else? Let's see if I think we got the word count here. This might work better. Might not. The library may be reading this for a while unless they have.
Erica, do you have a spray in that cardboard box that you're feeding?
Oh,
Yeah.
okay. We
She
can
was,
use-
she was going to wait for you to be done with that before telling you that.
Okay.
Watch you
Just
try.
let me do that for a little bit. No, I get it. So we have, it's something I would definitely do. So we have mom, being a female, local and world history, healthcare, especially ears and what they don't consider healthcare for some reason. Public schools, climate alarm, rights of the disenfranchised, and life as a naturalized citizen and what that entails. Anyone else? Okay, so I mean, you see this, here's my 4. You see that so many different things from so many different perspectives motivate your writing. And before you go to write an op-ed or a letter to the editor, you really want to sit with these things for a while. Don't get in a rush. That is one of my biggest pieces of advice I can give you. Do not rush it. Don't rush it. I mean, if you get, especially if you're not an experienced writer you haven't done it for a long time, you don't have a whole lot of experience with it, take your time with it. Really think out what it is you want to say, because there may be something in the moment that you're really passionate about. You're angry, you're upset, maybe there's been a death in the family because of our crappy healthcare system. Maybe you are starting to get bills in the mail from Mohila again for your $200,000 in college loan debt or whatever. I don't have that much, but I know people who do. And in that moment, you're extremely angry and you're like, I just want to get this out in a letter to the editor or an op-ed. Take time, sit with that. Sit with that and think out all the angles of that you want to consider. So I write a lot about climate change. I may see something in the news I do see something in the news every day that infuriates me about climate change and our overall disregard for life on our only planet that we can occupy in the cosmos, right? Don't have another one. Elon Musk wants to jump to another one. Good luck. Just hop on that rocket, bub. But we don't have another one that we know we can occupy and live on. So, I see something every day that upsets and infuriates me about climate change. If I jump right to the computer right now and start trying to formulate ideas about that, that's fine. Sit down and formulate ideas, maybe write a couple of paragraphs and see what it is you're trying to say and really think about that. But I highly advise you don't try to crank out 300 or 400 words, or especially 500 or 700 words, and submit that right away just because you're so angry in that moment. Give it time, let it simmer. There's probably other details to consider as well. Here's a good example. I wrote a lengthy email. This wasn't an op-ed piece or an LTTE. It could become one. But I wrote a lengthy email to City Council yesterday. I had a lot to say. I thought about it for hours. It took me about an hour to get it all down. But in that moment, I hadn't had the chance yet to read the newspaper and some news coverage about what I was talking about. So one thing to keep in mind that I didn't include in my email, and my email was about the fact that they want 5 sponsors now instead of 3 to add an item to the public meeting agenda. Well, they only want the 5 sponsors instead of 3 for discussion items. Now, you could still introduce a resolution or an ordinance as a city council member with 3 instead of 5. But if you want to discuss something at a public meeting as a city council member and put that on the agenda so that you can, they want 5. Now, there's a reason they did that, and that's why I wrote the email, right? There's a reason that they're considering it tomorrow night at 7:30 at the municipal building. But if I had taken the time to be able to get my newspaper, which now comes, I read a physical copy of the newspaper for the most part. I also read digital, but I was waiting on the physical copy because it was a weekend. I get the weekend edition that way. And it now comes by U.S. mail. It's going to start coming by U.S. mail, which runs later in the day than the folks who threw it to your door. So I didn't have it yet, and I hadn't read it digitally yet. So if I had read that first, I may have reworded my email just a little bit. So give things time to fester, things time to not necessarily fester. That sounds like it's just automatically getting worse. Figure out the details. Think through the details. Think through some different perspectives about what you're angry about, or what you are just passionate and want to write about. Maybe it's positive. And before you put that down, really stop and consider and think things through. But this was so good because just in this one room with just a few people here this evening, we have so many examples of what motivates people to write and issues surrounding these things. And sort of the next, I don't necessarily have to keep using this up here, but the next thing we can do before I wrap up is if you stop and think about these issues you gave, or another one entirely, whatever, and think about what angle you would take. So let's just take some examples up here. If your example was you are a mom. What angle would you take if you wanted to write an op-ed tomorrow or this week? I'm telling you to take longer than tomorrow, right? If you wanted to write an op-ed for submission by the weekend edition when they run, about being a mom and what it's like in this moment to be a mom, what would your take be?
I'm angry.
You're angry. You're really angry. But what? Let's say one thing. There's 50 million, right?
Yeah.
But what is one thing that comes to mind that makes you angry as a mom in this moment? If you're comfortable saying, I don't want to put you on the spot. But.
It's just putting it down to one. My oldest has health issues, and as a mom, I'm very limited on what I can and cannot do, and we are kind of just even limited with what doctors will and won't do.
Because for like insurance reasons and these bogus American healthcare reasons. Okay.
Yeah, so that's very, very frustrating.
Guaranteed. Yeah, absolutely. With the rights of the disenfranchised, what's if you were to write about the rights of the disenfranchised, what angle would you take? Just if you wanted to submit.
Right now, it's along the same lines as what you are talking about. City council representation, them doing everything they can to violate the ability for people in the minority, what they deem, because our council's divided 7-2, and prohibiting them from having an equal voice at the table. They claim to follow Robert's Rules of Order, and that specifically has been written over the years to allow protection of those that are not in power to be a part of, even though it protects the majority vote. It is specifically designed to empower those that are in the minority to still have a place at the table. And they're doing everything to violate that as possible.
That would be, and that would be a great angle to take. I would love to read it. Who said local history? What do you think would motivate you to write about local history?
If I'm a mom still, or what's the?
Oh no, just your perspective on local, any perspective on local history.
Okay, because I was trying to think if I'm a mom, what? I think I would see, has this happened before, something like this has happened before?
Mm.
And what happened? And when did it happen?
Yeah.
And sometimes a lot of people here don't realize who was through here, who has been in this town. And I think a lot of times they think that it's that Parkersburg has, I'm talking about Parkersburg.
Oh, sure, yeah.
But Parkersburg has generally just always been just a little place on the river, and it was major at the turn of the century.
Yeah, absolutely, and that would be a great perspective, and then also sort of that perspective of nothing new under the sun, right? Like we've seen it before, right? And how did we handle it before? Yeah. So that offers a really good perspective. Someone else said, I think, world history. Who said world history?
Well, it's probably been done to death, but I think it bears repeating parallels of what's happening now and say what's happened in the world history, like in World War II.
Yeah.
And what we see coming, or what we can extrapolate from that.
And that would be really good, maybe to talk about some of that World War II history that a lot of folks aren't as familiar with. I know from a labor point of view, just to kind of give from the union perspective, making the trip on the 9th down to Lenoir, West Virginia, and seeing the West Virginia Mine Wars Museum, and grabbing a couple books and just finishing one this week, and kind of understanding aspects of that history that I never have before. That is something that, as a West Virginian, I feel robbed of. because I turned 40 years old this year, and this is my first real experience with, I've heard of Blair Mountain and the West Virginia mine wars before, but not in any detail, not in any meaningful context. So, I wrote a recent Substack entry about my trip down there and what that was like, and what it was like to be in person in the coal fields in Mingo County, West Virginia, and go to that Mine Wars Museum, which is run by an incredible couple, an incredible staff, and get to see the local union down there, the Union Hall for 1440, United Mine Workers of America. So that was a perspective that, as a West Virginian, I feel like I should have had before, even just with a public school K through 12 education, without going to college or anything. And I feel like I was, and many of us are, robbed of some of the most important labor history in the world that happened pretty much on our doorstep, because there's just no broader educational or public discussion of what really occurred there. And so that motivated me to write. So that's essentially what I want to leave you with. I mean, Meryl really discussed, and a lot of what Meryl discussed is also applicable to op-ed writing and letter to the editor writing, in terms of, you want to lead with something strong, your who, what, where, when, why, and how, and you develop, that reverse pyramid style with the body and a strong conclusion. It is still good if you're writing a letter to the editor or op-ed, especially op-ed because it's lengthier, if you leave something at the end that's an action item for someone to carry forward. So I'm not just listening to this Eric Engel, I'm not just reading this Eric Engel guy ranting. At the end, he tells me, I need to contact my congressperson about supporting this legislation, or I need to contact a member of the House of Delegates in West Virginia about opposing this legislation, or maybe it's not even policy related. I need to go to the next Wood County Board of Education meeting because something's happening. Leave them with something to do, something to think about, maybe a strong quote about whatever your subject matter was. Just leave them thinking and prepared to act in some way and move forward in some way and take what you wrote them in a meaningful direction for themselves, the broader public. And encourage them to get involved. When I wrote this past weekend our Mid-Ohio Valley Climate Action Climate Corner column, which we've been writing weekly to the Parkersburg News and Sentinel since March of 2021, and we have a stable of about 12 or 13 writers right now, I always end it with something along the lines of, here's what we're doing with this past weekend I ended it with, here's what we're doing with our website. We're revamping it and making it this. Please visit it at this address. Look us up on Facebook on our popular group page. You can look through 10 years of posts there with a search catalog. So you give them something to do and ways to become involved, and hopefully down the road you see them, like with Mid-Ohio Valley Climate Action, maybe someone does get involved, or they learn something from that piece that they can take away and do something with, even if they don't want to get directly involved with us. So definitely leave them with an action piece or something motivating that they can take away that's really going to make them think and research more and delve more into what you wrote about. So, any questions for me? Okay, great. Thanks for. Oh, yeah, go ahead.
About you. I've been a lead reporter for the Parkersburg News and for the Daily Mail in Charleston 100 years ago, before I reinvented myself and became a nurse at 40. But probably, I don't know, my kid was still in high school and she's been out for 8 years. I was having a conversation with a friend in Charleston who is an attorney who works with the West Virginia Supreme Court about an op-ed piece written by a man named Eric Engel. And we were having this discussion, and we knew another Eric Engel in Charleston who is also an attorney. And I was like, did our Eric write this? And my friend was like, I don't think so. And she's like, I like this guy. I was like, I like him too. And here I am. I moved here 6 years ago, and here I am with Eric Engel. And so you really are having an impact with your writing, and I hope you continue.
Thank you so much.
You're
It's
very
so
welcome.
reassuring to hear
I
that.
hope you continue, because you are noticed, and that was that long ago. So Yeah.
That is amazing. And, you know, one other quick story I'll share, I know we're coming up on an hour of being here, is I wrote a piece to an op-ed down there, and a friend of mine got married, and he married a girl who was the granddaughter of a federal district court judge who had decided in my favor as a plaintiff in a lawsuit against the city of Parkersburg, right? At the time, 97-year-old man who was appointed by Gerald Ford. And he ruled, and this was just the greatest ruling I've ever read. It was 30 pages of just constitutional jurisprudence like you've never seen. He's a brilliant man. There's a reason he's still on the bench at almost 100 years old. Now he is 100 years old. But I met him at their wedding because this was her grandfather. And she came up to me, and I had no idea this was her grandfather. And she said, my grandfather would like to meet you. And I'm, okay, well, who's that? And she tells me it's this judge. And I'm like, really? And so I go and I'm like, just because he ruled in my favor? Or like, yeah, I'll go talk to him. He's like, no, I read you in the Charleston Gazette. I was like, oh, okay. Well, it's great to meet you too. And it was such an honor that this man with this brilliant legal mind, who's been on the bench for decades, read me in the Charleston Gazette and said he enjoyed reading what I wrote. And I was like, that was very powerful. Yeah, and so I really appreciate your story and everyone's time this evening, and thank you all so much.
I'll
see if
also
I can raise
throw
this
this
forward.
out there as a newspaper reporter. We don't want to hear bitching. Like,
Yeah.
that was the last thing. Like, don't be that person. Don't make what you're doing a complaint. Like,
Yeah.
don't do that. There's a way to make it positive. There's
Right.
a way to spin it in a positive way. Try to find that way.
That's good.